Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. I'm Ross McCorkle, and above me here on the screen, as always, is Joe Clark, and we're going to talk about three of the biggest Steelers-related news topics of the week. A couple of players spoke to the media, doing various interviews. We'll talk about some of that, some former player opinions, and we'll wrap up the show discussing some controversial topics about the Steelers having their first losing season, which seems to pop up this time of year pretty much every year on the dot. Before we hop in, Joe, how's things in your world?
Doing well, doing well. I mean, not a ton of Steelers stuff going on, but OTA is coming up soon, so ready to start ramping up.
And your Celtics, sorry about that situation.
Yeah,
I think once Tatum got hurt, it was pretty
tough.
much a sealed deal there. But are they blowing
Yeah.
things up there? Is that the kind of the vibe?
Not gonna completely blow it up, but they got a new owner coming in. Their current roster construction with what they're paying everybody is kind of untenable. There's no way they're going to be able to keep going forward. So there's going to be some movement in this offseason. It'll be interesting to see who goes where and what pieces they decide to keep. But won't be a full blow up. But with Tatum, I mean, it's an Achilles. He might miss all of next season too. So not looking too promising after winning the title last year.
That is tough. Sorry to hear about that. Moving into our first topic of the day, Charlie Batch appeared on. Oh gosh, what show was he even on?
Arthur Moats.
That's right, the Arthur Moats Experience podcast. There on YouTube, and he had some interesting things to say about the Steelers quarterback situation between Mason Rudolph and presumably Aaron Rodgers if he ends up signing. And Charlie Batch, now take this for what you will. He was a backup quarterback, and therefore, he has probably a soft spot for your career backup quarterbacks. But he said Mason Rudolph might end up with a leg up, quote, a leg up on Rodgers. Let me just read the quote in full here. Let's see. Mason Rudolph, he was here, but he wasn't in the system, so he does have a leg up as it relates to learning the offense because he's been here for the last couple months. I think the longer it goes towards training camp, I think you have to give the edge to Mason Rudolph because that means he knows the system a little bit better than what Aaron Rodgers does. So he's acknowledging that, well, if Aaron Rodgers drags his feet any longer and you end up with, maybe he misses voluntary OTAs next week and then it drags on a little further into June 10th, which is when mandatory minicamp is. Say Aaron Rodgers misses that date. Then, Joe, is there any world in which you see Aaron Rodgers not having, quote, I guess what you would call pole position, regardless of, even if he signs halfway through training camp somehow?
No, and he's not going to sign if he's going to back up Mason Rudolph. Like, I understand the angle that Batch is coming from, but there's absolutely zero chance whatsoever that Aaron Rodgers is signing to, even for a day or two, take snaps behind Mason Rudolph. I mean, at this point, I think you kind of have to assume that if Rodgers is going to sign, that he has some semblance of the system. He met with Arthur Smith when he came to Pittsburgh, so I don't really think like it's as big of a deal. There's just no chance that Mason Rudolph will ever have the leg up if they do sign Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, on one hand, I think it's like I don't think the Steelers are lying or what the reporters are hearing about the Steelers and Mason Rudolph. I don't think that anybody's telling a lie about how much they like Rudolph. I think that they can like him plenty, but you don't you don't bring in Aaron Rodgers and have any kind of question about who's starting, even at 41 years old. Yeah, it's just wouldn't be a good look. It would be a bad situation in general if they tried to have some kind of competition, and it's just gets messy from that point forward. And you feel bad for Mason Rudolph because he's never gotten the chance to actually enter a season as the starter, prepare as the starter the whole way through, and get an honest shot at kind of starting maybe the first however many games to kind of see what he's got. And I think there's a good portion of the fan base that probably would like to see Rudolph in that capacity. But now I think Will Howard's kind of murkying that up even a little bit. I think the fan base is now split between, all right, well, if the Steelers aren't going to win, you might as well get Will Howard in there as soon as possible. So, bottom line, yes, I think we're in agreement. Rodgers is the starter if he comes in. I mean, we saw it last year with Russell Wilson having pole position over Justin Fields. Yes, Wilson was there for OTAs and minicamp and stuff, so it was a little different than this Aaron Rodgers situation. But he missed most of training camp and preseason, most of the preseason, missed, the first 4 games of the regular season, or sorry, the first 6 games of the regular season, excuse me. And they still put Russell Wilson back in once he was healthy. So I think as long as Aaron Rodgers is healthy, regardless of if he signs the week before the regular season starts, I think he is going to be the starter for better or for worse. Some interesting stuff from a biographer, Ian O'Connor, who wrote a book about Aaron Rodgers. I think it was published in 2024 called Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. He interviewed 250 people around Rodgers back during that time, and so he's as plugged in as anybody that isn't in Rodgers', I guess, small inner circle that he has, which who knows who's in that anyways. But I think, O'Connor probably has a pretty good idea of what's going on there. He said he admits he doesn't keep up day to day like he was when he was writing that book, but he said he does check in from time to time, and he seems to think that whatever Rodgers' personal commitments are pretty close to being resolved. And so he thinks, we could be getting an answer here by the end of May or early June. Certainly by mandatory minicamp was kind of his prediction. Joe, are you still kind of assuming that he's going to sign before mandatory minicamp? Do you think it's going to happen before voluntary OTAs? What do you think the timeline is?
Yeah, I mean, I think voluntary OTAs might be a little bit of a stretch, but I do think we probably will have an answer at mandatory minicamp. I mean, as far as the personal commitments being resolved, he was in Austin this weekend partying at a stud concert, so it seemed like he was able to let loose and have a good time. So hopefully whatever was going on there is close to being resolved, like O'Connor kind of hinted at. So yeah, I think June 11th, which is I think that's the start of mandatory minicamp. I think by then is probably when we'll have an answer. I'm be a little surprised if we have one within the next week. Would be good if we did, but I think minicamp is a more realistic timeline.
That's June 10 through the 12th
10th.
for the Steelers.
Okay.
So you'd hope to have, at least probably the 9th kind of being that maybe the rough deadline. Adam Schefter even said if it's not by then it's fair to wonder if he's even going to play this year. And so I think everyone kind of expects that to be sort of the line in the sand. I know Mike Tomlin initially said training camp's more or less the line in the sand, but he kind of backtracked that a little bit. And Art Rooney, probably because of Art Rooney, who put a little bit more, urgency on the matter, basically saying they aren't going to wait for Aaron Rodgers forever. While he expects a decision to come soon, he did say kind of a strong preference that Rodgers is around for this off-season activities and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be super surprised if he ends up signing by, say, the end of this week and does some of the voluntary OTAs. I mean, the narrative that he doesn't like OTAs is wrong. I mean, he missed last year's mandatory minicamp, which was just a 3-day event. It's not like a huge deal, honestly. It is mandatory, so if you skip it, it says something. And yes, he shouldn't have planned a trip to Egypt. It's kind of ridiculous to be 20 years into the NFL and claim that you don't know, have some kind of pre-planned trip during a mandatory. Yes, that's not a good look. But to say that he doesn't like OTAs or that he doesn't like minicamp or the offseason in general is just wrong. Up until, I think it was his last 2 years with the Packers, he never missed any offseason stuff ever, as far as what I could research back. And the only reason he missed the stuff with the Packers is because they drafted Jordan Love. They refused to draft him receivers. He kind of disagreed with the direction of the team, and he wanted them to commit to him further with their contract. So it was kind of a contractual holdout and not just a I don't like the offseason kind of thing. And so I think I wouldn't be too surprised if he does sign by the end of this week, and reports for voluntary OTAs starting on the 27th, which is 1 week from today. We will see. I think mandatory minicamp's more likely, but it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if he's there for OTAs, which there's only, six practices this year?
6, yeah.
Yeah, so 9 total sessions, including minicamp, if he goes to all of them, and that's basically what the old OTAs used to be, which was 9 OTA sessions, one team building day, and then a 3-day mandatory minicamp. So it's already abbreviated. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he ends up signing, but we will see. I think that's roughly all the Ian O'Connor did say. Rodgers knows that there's kind of last year was an embarrassment in New York and knows that he was the face of that embarrassment, and basically suggested that Pittsburgh's the perfect place to get rid of that, and basically saying he doesn't think Rodgers will ultimately retire, in line with what a lot of other people have been saying. So moving on to our second topic here, sticking with the quarterback, sticking with Mason Rudolph a little bit. Rudolph appeared on the Kaboly and Mack show on YouTube and said some interesting things, one of which was talking about how the depth chart might be determined sometimes, which was I guess it's not a huge surprise, but it is kind of a funny statement. Joe, what did he say there?
Yeah, so Mason Rudolph said, which Mason Rudolph was the second most interesting thing that happened on the Kaboly and Mack show yesterday. But he goes, I learned a long time ago that the financial compensation will tell you what's going to go down in terms of the depth chart. I get it. All I can do is keep having a good spring and make the most of every rep. That's what I've done my whole career. I'm confident that we're going to play well and win games when my name is called. So, and kind of interesting, like I mean, it's a professional answer, but a little bit of shade maybe from what happened back in 2022 when Mitch Trubisky got the starting nod after he was brought in as a free agent. Um, and then Kenny Pickett obviously got his opportunity, and it wasn't until the end of 2023 and Rudolph was able to kind of take over, and he played better than Trubisky or Pickett played in at all during their Steelers tenure. So maybe a little bit of saltiness there, but I mean, the whole interview with Rudolph, he was, professional. He's talked about, he understands the Steelers quarterback plan. Talked a little bit about, an interaction he had with Aaron Rodgers in 2018, but did say that he hasn't talked to anybody the team could bring in, but kind of seemed okay with the idea of the team signing Rodgers. But that was definitely a little bit of an interesting comment there.
So Mason Rudolph is getting a 2-year, $7.5 million contract, and Aaron Rodgers told Pat McAfee show that he'd be willing to play for $10 million. And so if you take Mason Rudolph's statement at face value, Rudolph is essentially saying he knows he's going to be the backup while also taking some shots at the way things worked out in the past. And so, yeah, I think Rudolph is a good backup to have. I'm glad he's on the depth chart. I think some people would probably prefer Will Howard to be the primary backup, but you want some experience there. You don't want to have a rookie getting thrust into action. I know people will argue with that point and say that what's the point anyways if the Steelers are not going to contend this year, but the Steelers always think they can contend and always act as if they are going to contend. That shouldn't surprise anybody that's been following the team. What else did Rudolph say? He talked about Tennessee, his time in Tennessee helping him appreciate Pittsburgh more. Oh, and he also talked about he thinks he's a perfect fit for Arthur Smith's system and kind of fits his play style well, which is, he talked about Arthur Smith running the football a lot, which we all know that. But he also talked about Arthur Smith and Mike Tomlin, for that matter, taking shots and basically looking for big plays. I think he said big play hunting. And Mason Rudolph, in those 3 games that he played at the end of the 2023 season with the Steelers, had 10 plays of 20 or more yards, so 10 explosive passing plays in those 3 games alone. I think there was one game, I think it was the Seahawks game, where he had 5 in just that one game. And good timing for the Steelers. They just brought in DK Metcalf, one of the premier deep threats in the league, with very unique size and speed blend. And so, yeah, could be an interesting fit for Rudolph if he ever gets thrust into action. And history tells us that he'll probably end up starting at least a game or 2 at some point during the season. Yes, Aaron Rodgers has been durable, but he's 41 years old, and the Steelers' history of quarterbacks, they usually miss a game or 2 at some point throughout the season. So I think we'll see some Mason Rudolph, and I think he'll get that chance at some point, and hopefully he ends up looking good. I think he has every shot to. This is probably the most, I mean, is this the best offense Rudolph has been in? I know it's hard to say without anything happening yet, but
The best that he'll actually have an opportunity to play it. I mean, early in his tenure, obviously the Steelers when they had, Antonio Brown, an emerging juju. Those offenses were better, but he never really had a real chance to play. So I think this is probably in the last 4 years. This is probably the best offense he's been in.
Right, because Brown was there in 2018, but he never played. 2019, that offense was starting to get pretty rough. I mean, you had Duck Hodges, and the offensive line was a little better, but those guys were aging. It was starting to get a little rough. So yeah, I think probably the best situation, and not to, we can't look past the fact that he was with Randy Fichtner and Matt Canada for his entire time with the Steelers, and now people will say things about Arthur Smith, but in my opinion, way better, way more creative than either Fichtner or Canada. And so I think Rudolph has every chance to succeed if he gets that opportunity. We will see if that ends up happening. Moving into our third topic, and this kind of piggybacks off of what we were just saying about, is this team a decent roster offensively in totality? And multiple analysts have kind of given their win projections for the Steelers. You have things like Cynthia Freeland from NFL Network. You've got Adam Schein from CBS, Chris Broussard, all kinds of people throwing around their predictions. And a lot of people seem to think the Steelers are going to have their first losing season, which is an annual occurrence at this point. But Joe, you want to recap some of what those win total projections are and your thoughts on the matter?
So Cynthia Freeland had 8.3 as her analytics based over under. So round down, let's take an 8-9 record. So that would be a losing season. Adam Schein predicted a losing season. He said he guarantees 5 to 6 wins, which is a little bit stronger than just a losing season. That would be a bad losing season. And Chris Broussard kind of said, "Oh, I hope I'm wrong, but I think this is going to be a losing season, even with Aaron Rodgers." Basically, his only evidence was that Aaron Rodgers' last 2 seasons were losing seasons. He didn't really seem all that strong in his take. And I mean, it's not really a huge surprise. This happens pretty much every offseason now over the last few years that the Steelers' offense doesn't look good. There's a deficiency somewhere on defense. So you look at their schedule, which is always usually pretty difficult, and they're going to have a losing season. And I love Adam Schein. He's actually one of my favorite analysts, but I think ever since I've been listening to him, since I was probably in middle school or high school, he always thinks the Steelers are finally due for a losing season. And then he changes his tune early in the season, and then he changes his tune again late in the season. But he's not alone. That's what everybody does, because they start off hot, and then it's like Mike Tomlin is the best coach in the league, and then they fade down the stretch, and it's, well, they are who we thought we were. I do think this year is probably more the least confident I felt in the Steelers having a winning season, just because of the Aaron Rodgers uncertainty right now, because we don't know if he's going to sign or not. So I'm usually pretty confident that they'll at least win 9 or 10 games, and I think if Aaron Rodgers signs, I'll be pretty confident they can win 9 or 10 games. But just because there's just that little bit of uncertainty hanging overhead, I do think this year I'm not in complete disagreement when these people say, "Hey, it might be a losing season." Of course, Chris Broussard said it would come with Aaron Rodgers, which I don't agree with. But right now, you just can't say for sure that this is a team that's going to be able to, win 9, 10 games and compete for the playoffs. So I think at least until we get the assurance from Rodgers, it's hard to, really disagree too vehemently with their opinions.
Yeah, certainly a 5-win season would be notable. That would be I think a top 6, 7 draft pick at the worst. And so you talk about a top 6 or 7 draft pick plus all of the extra draft capital the Steelers have projected to get through the compensatory system and the George Pickens trade. Steelers would have an insane, probably the most draft value in the league or close to it, rivaling even the Browns, who have 2 first-round picks, even the Rams, who have 2 first-round picks. They'd be right up there if they finished that poorly. So that would be notable. I think, unfortunately, there's going to be a fair amount of fans kind of rooting for that type of thing to happen. I get it, but I think it would be a pretty rough season if the Steelers are doing that poorly. We've seen what happens when the Steelers have a 3-game losing streak, and some of the negativity and some of it starts to come apart at the seams, or at least the media portrays things that way. I mean, can you imagine if they went on, say, a 6 or 7 game losing streak at some point? Just how bad it would get in the media. I mean, it might get so bad that people might just stop talking about them altogether. uh, which is the worst thing that can happen for an NFL franchise. So, yeah, I don't know. I think let's go through like different. I think with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, there's no shot that they go under 500 at all. I think he's the best. Would you agree with this statement? He's the best quarterback they've had since 2018 Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, I would.
So it's pre-injury Ben Roethlisberger, talking Trubisky, 3-game Rudolph, Pickett. Who am I missing? Obviously, Wilson, Fields. I think that's everybody.
Yeah.
I guess Doc Hodges. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not a high bar to clear for Rodgers, but he almost produced. Well, he basically did produce 2,000-yard receivers last season. He would have if Devonta Adams was there the whole season. He was on pace to with Adams, and he got him across that line anyways. And he only won 5 games with the Jets, which, yeah, I guess you can sit here and say, how could you guarantee over a 500 record if he only won 5 games with the Jets? But the Jets are the Jets. The Steelers, I mean, just pointing back to that Duck Hodges season, have always been able to get it done, and in much worse situations. I think the offensive line's probably better than it's been in a while. I think the defense, there's really no reason to expect a drop off, and if anything, probably a small step forward. Now, obviously, big things could happen. A Watt injury could derail things significantly. Hayward finally falling off could derail things significantly. So if you want to bet on things like that, then sure, I guess you could start to say, like, okay, yes, the Steelers are due for a big step back. But, I mean, Darius Slay, probably better than Dante Jackson, or at least similar, and, certainly won't hopefully be as injured. He's been more durable throughout his career. The linebacking core is pretty deep. I think adding Malik Harrison and getting Cole Holcomb back into the mix, you're pretty set there. The edge group has a bunch of depth now with a guy like Jack Sawyer, and Nick Herbig's another year long. He should, be doing even better at this point than he has in his first 2 seasons. I just don't see a big reason for this defense to decline. Joe, if there is one reason for concern on defense, what is it in your mind?
I think it would be that the pass rush can't get home like we kind of saw in the second half last year. Because, I mean, the secondary's okay, it's decent, but the secondary is a lot better when the pass rush is getting home. That's what we saw in the first half of the year last year. Second half, I mean, Highsmith had dealt with his injuries. Watt was a little bit banged up, but the pass rush wasn't really getting home as consistently as it was in the beginning of the year. So if the Steelers pass rush does struggle, which I don't anticipate it will, but if it does, I think that would be the biggest reason why the defense as a whole kind of starts to show some cracks.
Yeah, Alex Highsmith last year injured for much of the season. When he was in, his disruption was pretty good. His pressures and quarterback hits and stuff, he didn't necessarily get home on as many sacks as you'd like, but I think a full season of both of them healthy hasn't happened in a little bit, and is due kind of for a big year if that happens. And yeah, I mean, Derek Harmon, what is that going to do for freeing up somebody like, they're putting him on the same side as Watt? Isn't that the plan?
I believe so, yes.
So, yeah, I mean, Watt is going to have hopefully a promising, disruptive rookie that offensive lines have to worry about. And what does that do for freeing up Watt? Watt was chipped more than any linebacker, any edge player in the league last year by a pretty large margin, according to Pro Football Focus. Like, we're talking 20, 30, 40 more times than the next highest player, which was Myles Garrett, and then a big drop off even after those two. And so if you're unable to chip Watt, what does that do? I think that the pass rush will hopefully be improved. And I think, even somebody like Juan Thornhill is a sneaky addition into this defense. I think he's an upgrade over DeMonte KZ. I think he's more versatile, so they're going to be able to do some more things where you move Deshaun Elliott around, put him in the big slot. You can also put Juan Thornhill as a big slot. You can also put, Minkah Fitzpatrick, any of those places. And so you can kind of make things more difficult on offenses, a lot more guesswork, a lot less that you can glean from film study if they do it correctly. And so I think this defense has a chance to be, I mean, at the beginning of last season, they looked like one of the best in the league. I think that they have the chance of looking like that for a full season because of some of the depth. They've added a lot of depth. They've added some top end talent as well. So I'm optimistic about the defense. And can you really project 5 wins if your defense is that good? I don't think you can. So that's kind of my reasoning there. Whether or not the offense will be good, I mean, I guess that's up for debate. But we've talked about over the last few weeks, Caleb Johnson, reason for optimism. DK Metcalf, maybe hasn't been the most productive the last few years, but has been productive as a touchdown. I think I added it up, and since he entered the league in 2019, he has the 5th most touchdowns in the NFL. So his yard production hasn't been elite, but he's scored a lot, and he certainly hasn't worked with a quarterback the caliber of Aaron Rodgers since some of those Russell Wilson years when he was fully healthy. So I think could see big things there. Reason for optimism. Calvin Austin III, Roman Wilson, probably some reasons for optimism there. Joe, same question on offense. What's the biggest concern in your mind right now?
The offensive line. I mean, I think it's just, I think it should be good. Troy Fautano, I have high hopes for him. But Broderick Jones going to left tackle, really for the first time for an extended period in his NFL career. If they do have Aaron Rodgers, he'll get the ball quick and minimize some of those concerns. But then you still have the concerns for the run game. I think the offensive line has to be better than it has been in the past, and I think it should be and it will be. But if it isn't, then you have Rodgers getting out quick, and it's going to be checkdowns and a run game that can't get off, 2-3 yards of carry, nothing really, sustained, I guess. No amount of sustained success if the offensive line struggles. And I think that would be a cause for concern and a reason why this offense could crumble.
Yeah, there's a lot of projections going on with the offensive line. Troy Fautanu is still a projection. Broderick Jones on the left side, still kind of a projection. I mean, even Zach Frazier, I think, is the most sure thing, along with Isaac Seumalo. But there's such a thing as kind of a sophomore hitting the wall, and uh, Zach Frazier looked very promising. Don't get me wrong, but you just can't make hard conclusions after a rookie season. We've seen too many times where that comes back to bite teams or people in the butt. So, and Mason McCormick, I don't know if we can really classify him as. I think he's promising, but I don't know if we can really classify him as good yet. And so there's a lot of projections, a lot of hope, just hoping that they gel. There's a lot of that involved with this offense this year. And you're right, that is the biggest issue. If Aaron Rodgers is constantly under siege at 41 years old, that's not going to be good. And the run game, I mean, I guess the only silver lining there is Caleb Johnson's used to running into stack boxes and maybe used to dealing with getting hit at or behind the line of scrimmage. So hopefully that's kind of the silver lining. But yeah, offensive line, big cause for concern, and probably the biggest cause for concern on the entire team right now. If they do well, I could easily see the Steelers doing better than they did last year.
Definitely.
And so if they don't do well, I mean, I'm still not bought into a losing season. Is this the most confident or the least confident I've been in a winning season? Yeah, I guess if I had to, I don't know. Last year wasn't like great in my mind. I guess it depends when you ask me, because if it was during the Russell Wilson injury and we thought Justin Fields was going to be the starter, or some of those times I was a little less certain. But yeah, I think we've beat the losing season thing down, and I'm sure it'll be said many more times, but I think we covered that pretty well here. Joe, is there anything else that has happened over the last week that we missed here?
No, it's been a pretty dry week in terms of news. I think we are good.
Will Howard was just on Up and Adams this morning. He said he looks forward to hopefully working with Aaron Rodgers. He looked up to Aaron Rodgers when he was young. He said something about he thinks Ben Roethlisberger is going to be a good mentor to him. Of course, he appeared on Ben Roethlisberger's podcast. What was that, a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, it was like 2 weeks ago, I think.
And so that's a notable thing. Well, what else did he say? He said one other thing.
Just kind of in general, just talked about, his excitement to be with the Steelers and play under Mike Tomlin. He got to see his rookie card for the first time because it was the
The premiere.
Panini from Rookie Premiere, so he got to see his card, which always cool, I guess, to see a player finally get on a trading card. Especially, I guess, I don't know if he collected cards or anything, but probably nice, cool little story there.
Yeah, so that's it for this week. We don't have any questions, but if you would like a question answered on a future episode, that's 412-254-3145. Again, that's 412-254-3145. You can text that number, or you can give us a call and leave a voicemail for a chance to have your question answered on a future episode. If I said the number too fast, it is in the show notes as well. Be sure to tell us your name and where you're from. We want to get to know as many of you guys as we can. And that is all for this week. We will catch you guys next time. This time next week, OTAs will be starting. And so maybe our show will happen in the morning. Maybe it'll happen later in the afternoon. But either way, expect that show on Tuesday. And we will catch you guys next time.